the #1 rated business show with me, Mr. Markenology, Real Deal Jeff Bill. And I'm taking control of the hosting today. You know, we got KC behind the boards, but I'm going to go ahead and host this one today. And we're going to have the Miss Anita Russell from Inflexion Point Podcast back on the show. We're still going to talk about what we're doing right now in the racial climate of today. Anita, thanks for coming back.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. And getting here was a lot easier this time than it was last time.
Yeah, you didn't have to face that traffic, huh?
Exactly.
Well,
exactly.
I know you ran down here because it was, cold up in Pittsburgh, and you had to come back down to Atlanta where some of the heat was. So how was your trip?
It was uneventful. I'll just put it like that. My plane landed when it was supposed to. Somebody picked me up. Perfect.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, at least you wasn't on Spirit. I've been hearing some things about Spirit.
No.
I've been hearing about it. Man, so how have things been? What's been new?
Well, things are really, really moving along very well. I got a lot of kind of pots on the stove that are cooking all at one time, and they're all starting to boil up at the same time, which is really, really good. But one of the things that I'm going to be doing in 2023, this is something new. I haven't really talked about it much before, but it's one of those pots that's brewing, is that we're going to do the first annual Anti-Racism Activation Summit.
Oh, okay.
So I'm super excited about doing that.
Wow. Tell me more about it. Or can you tell us?
Yeah. We're kind of in the process now of getting all the marketing pieces together, the graphics and stuff like that. And I want to give a shout out to a woman that I'm working with, Angelica Miller out of Detroit, because she's my social media person. She's phenomenal. And she's the one that actually helped me to put the idea together, because it was kind of like a bud of an idea for me. And then she started talking and our minds just kind of came together. So she put the entire strategy together. This is what you need to do and all of that. So she's my behind the scenes person. But the idea behind the summit is to kind of take everybody back to that moment in 2020, in May of 2020, when we lost George Floyd. And I look at that moment not just as a single point in time. I look at it as this culmination of all of these points in time. But with that particular event, something different was sparked.
Okay.
And what I'm interested in having people come on as speakers. So we're going to have like a lineup of speakers and that sort of thing. But I want people to talk about their origin story, and their origin story being that thing that started to happen and flow out of you the moment you saw what happened with George Floyd.
Okay.
When that became a part of your consciousness, what action did that spark for you? What did that cause you to do? What did that cause you to think about? And I want to give people an opportunity to kind of share their origin story, but then talk specifically about the work that they're doing, the work that they're doing ongoing, and where they see that in the future. What does that vision look like for you in that? So we're still fleshing stuff out, but I'm super excited.
Is it going to be a physical summit or a virtual?
It'll be virtual.
Okay.
Yeah,
great,
it'll be virtual.
Great. Can't wait to get the invite so we can go ahead and register for it.
Absolutely.
So with the George Floyd incident, and we had the whole pretty much world on his ear, and we stood, we marched, everything. Now it's a couple years later, and things have kind of died down as far as the uproar of it. You're not hearing on the news as much of police brutality. Do you think they're lulling us to sleep, or do you think that maybe some change has come?
I think there's a lot of work that's being done kind of on an underground kind of level.
Okay.
And I think for me, the thing that was really sparked with George Floyd's murder was, it's like the grassroots came alive. And the grassroots, like if you think about this is the best way I can connect it to, when I think about the Underground Railroad, there were people along that pathway going north and even going west where they they understood the cause, they understood the resistance, they understood all of that, and they quietly did what they did. So it's not like it was visible.
Okay.
Like, you didn't have a sign outside your door that said, this is stop number 5 on the Underground Railroad. It was all kind of undercover, if you will. And for me, because I talk to so many different people that are doing this work, and I think it gets to the point where your commitment level is there, and it doesn't have to be visible. It's just there.
Okay.
And so when you get this group of people over here, and then over here, and then over here, and then over here, and it's just multiplying.
Okay.
And it's just multiplying. That's what I see. And I say that, again, just based on the different people that I'm talking to and what people are doing and all of that. So I think this was different. That's why I look at it as this culminating point, where almost like a flashpoint, where a different level of activity came into existence, you know?
Now, last time we talked about building some alliances and working across table with different people. How is that coming along as of late?
Well, again, it kind of connects to what I was talking about with the summit, right? So I'll give you an example. When I just put some stuff out there on LinkedIn, right? I just started filtering my searches and looking for specific individuals where, using anti-racism as a keyword, or using, just other keywords that are related to diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice, like all of these keywords. And then I started getting these people that were bubbling up to the top. And I just started reaching out to them and just planting a seed. Hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing over here. You think you would be interested? Yeah. Well, send me your email. Okay, now I got your email. And that's how I'm going about building the list of potential speakers. So I think it's just a matter of just understanding that sometimes you may not be able to see the activity, but the activity is definitely there.
Okay.
That's the kind of sense
and that's
that I'm
interesting
getting.
in today's time, because everybody's look at me. Everybody's in social media wanting to be seen all the time. So yeah, that's very interesting. And shout out to your co-host.
Yeah, Mavis and Gail. Hey, wherever y'all are.
Yes. Now with everybody making these movements, and right now we're pretty much coming into a political season. Have you seen a lot of change with I guess you would say, the elected officials and those that usually put their best foot forward during this season, and then the rest of the time is back to the status quo norm? Have you seen anybody kind of making a stand or doing anything amazing?
Well, I've actually been paying attention to what's happening in Georgia.
Don't pay attention.
Yeah, I've been kind of looking at that movement.
We try to keep people from looking at Georgia.
But it's not just Georgia. I could have easily said Florida. And just looking at what's happening on the political, on the politics and everything. And to me, it's very troubling. Yeah. And I look at this particular party as desperately trying to hold on to something that needs to be eradicated. That's how I look at it. So we're trying to hold on to or like when you think about under COVID conditions, everybody was like, oh no, we want to go back to normal. We cannot go back to normal. Like, I think we're past that point where, like, it's to the point now, like, what does normal even look like anymore? Because things have changed so dramatically. And I look at it from the same point with the politics and the politicians. We can't go back and stay in that state of normalcy, because that state of normalcy is how we got to where we are, and just kind of accepting this as the normal way of living. But we cannot function like that anymore. Like, there should not have been anything normalized about the death of George Floyd, or the death of Breonna Taylor, or the death of Trayvon Martin, or Tamir Rice. There's nothing that should have been normalized about those incidents, but in fact, they were normalized. right?
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like we got to invent something new. We got to create something wholly different,
Okay.
you know?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the pandemic. I mean, we had the pandemic and everybody was back in the house. So pretty much it's a big reset. And now that everybody's coming out the house and they saying we outside, um, have you seen like racism change? I mean, because people had a chance to, first of all, the old norm, they were there. Then they were inside the house and they saw whatever social media or whatever media showed them.
Hmm.
Then they had a chance to reflect because you had nothing else to do because you were on house arrest for years. And now you're back into the general public. And
Hmm.
so, have you seen that change the way people look at racism and race?
I think the general public, and when I say general, I mean general, the general public has changed.
Okay.
And I think it's changed because there's so much information there that was completely invisible to other people or to a lot of people. Because, so for me, I'm a member of an organization called ASALA, the
Okay.
Association for the Study of African American Life and History,
Okay.
right? And as a result of me being in that organization, I am tapped into top-notch historians, professors, and all of those types of individuals, like who are writing books.
Okay.
Ibram Kendi, I don't know Ibram Kendi, but by way of this organization, I'm tapped into people who are on the same level as Ibram Kendi in terms of their knowledge of real history
Yeah.
in this country. And I think that is one of the things that's different now, post-pandemic, if you will,
Yeah.
versus pre-pandemic, is that there's a different knowledge that's being it's being made visible.
Okay.
And it's getting to the point where it's just coming, like and so now you have to make a choice. Am I just simply going to ignore it, or am I going to step back and understand it and maybe even challenge myself to see things through the lens of somebody who lives the experience of racism rather than
Yeah.
somebody who just reads about the experience of race? That's two completely different lanes to be in, understanding it versus experiencing it.
Yeah. So I want to touch on that because that touched deep to me. And Casey still hadn't got me my shirt. Stop co-signing on the bullshit. When we start looking at history, and we've been taught history from one vantage point, and then now with social media and all the media sources, you start to see history from other different perspectives. And a lot of times we've had I guess you would say, ancestors, our adult figures, elders, co-signing because they didn't speak about their experience. They just said, listen to your teacher. Your teacher's right. Christopher Columbus discovered America, and then they like, well, no, he really didn't, but just listen to your teacher. Don't worry about it. What have you found that, with all the information coming from all the different sources? Now, you're with historians. We're with social media, and everybody's an expert, and everybody was there. There's a lot of misinformation. How are we filtering through the misinformation of the old, the misinformation of new, and what really is history?
That's a really interesting question, especially the last part. What really is history? So you can either look at history in terms of it being like this timeline of these milestone events and all of that. But for me, what history really is, and it is an accumulation of human experiences. And so if you pull out the humanity of history and all you have are these facts, and sometimes the facts aren't necessarily the truth. They may be presented in such a way, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is based on truth. But I think the whole entire thing in terms of understanding the history of the United States, you cannot ignore lived experiences, right?
Yeah.
So one of my the historians that I follow is Dr. Ida Jones, right? And she made a statement once where she said, she was talking about, history and people and all of that. And she made a statement that it's really about harmonizing historical truth with lived experiences.
Okay.
So you can't experience historical truth if you don't acknowledge lived experiences. And especially when not acknowledging lived experiences enables you to maintain a system that is detrimental to the people who are having the lived experiences.
Yeah.
You
And
see?
don't we do that? I mean, somebody who's like, I lived this. Yeah, but you don't know what you're talking about. Because this person over here said it happened this way, but I was there. I lived it. And,
Exactly.
that's something that I don't know why we get hung up on that. And we say, well, it's because it was on this news source or it was in this book here. I was listening to, I think it was his name, Charleston. What was his name? Charleston White, I think.
I'm not sure.
Anyway, he was talking about reading books. And if it's not in the book, it's not true and blah, 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 blah. But it's like books are written by men. And men write books in the way that they want to spin the story. So whether it's said in social, it's said on television, or it's written in a book, it's still out of the perspective of the person that's actually telling the story. How do we get around that? Because a lot of people that lived in the racist time frame felt disempowered to speak. So they didn't speak of what happened. And those that controlled everything, they spoke very, boldly about how they wanted it to be seen or how they saw it. How do we start saying, Grandmama, what happened? Tell us what happened versus, well, do we just take this authority source and we say, oh, well, they said it and it happened that way. How do we get past that?
One of the challenges of, Grandma, tell me this, is that we have to also acknowledge that there's generational trauma that we're dealing with.
Okay.
And so there may be, you could pick 5 individuals, and each one of them may have a different way that they deal with the trauma that they have experienced in their lives. Some people totally shut down.
Okay.
Like, I can't even speak about it. I've pushed it completely out of my awareness, my consciousness, and all of that. And so to go back into that, it's like you're reliving that trauma.
Okay.
Right. And so that's one aspect of it. And then at the other extreme of that, you might see that individual, yes, I was traumatized by this, but this was wrong. And I need people to know that this is what happened to me.
Okay.
Because if it happened to me, I know it happened to other people. So in the space that I'm in, the anti-racism space, it's this idea of number one, courage. Having that courage to be able to speak your truth. It takes a lot to speak your truth, right? But then it's also about being able to step into your discomfort zone. Most people just want to be comfortable. You walk into a hotel lobby, you're going to look for the nice cushiony sofa with the pillows and, the best view and all of that.
I at the little motels. We don't even have sofas.
But the point being, people want to be comfortable, but you can also be comfortable in the midst of untruth or in the midst of lies, blatant lies. And those lies become a part of what is maintaining your comfort level.
Okay.
But then when you get faced with a different level of truth, right? And you get faced with, and I'm not even talking about something you read in a book. I mean, you mentioned Mavis and Gail. Sometimes when I share my experiences with them, it just blows them away because it's like, I would have never thought that was your experience, right?
Yeah.
And so, but they also, people like Mavis and Gail, they step into the discomfort zone with me because there's a level of discomfort with me sharing my own story, sharing that trauma or that pain that might be related to it. So I have to be able and willing to do that. But then for people who are listening to my story, and if their intention is to understand and to literally take on perspective taking, they have to be willing to step into their own discomfort zone.
Okay.
Because things are going to come up inside of them that they feel uncomfortable with. But in order for these conversations to happen, in order for things to truly go in a different way, we all have to be willing to step into discomfort.
Okay. And you do a lot of that, stepping into truths, and these younger kids, they're like, my truth. Everybody has my truth.
Right, right.
But, with the Inflexion Point podcast, y'all step into a lot of different truths, from different aspects and different ways of life. You get well, let me get my education. I should say Gail, Mavis, and yourself. Is that the proper way of doing it?
That's perfectly fine.
Well, I was a dean of this student. But anyway, I mean, y'all really embody that because you get different perspectives and guests that come on and give their perspective. And everybody can learn from everyone else's truth, because it's interesting how everybody has their truth, and their truth may not be true at all, but it's just how they see it. Tell us what we have on the horizon for Inflexion Point upcoming.
Yeah, so we actually just had our anniversary, our 24th episode. So we celebrated that, and we celebrated that by kind of doing a review of the stuff that we have done in the past. So one of the ways that I structure the whole entire thing, like how do we select guests and things like that, is that I look at things through this lens of these specific experiences, specific to us as Black folks living in the United States. But then I also pull in a global perspective.
Okay.
So, for example, we've had a woman from Sweden who she writes about racism on a regular basis. Rebecca Stevens Alder is her name.
Okay.
And she brings a really interesting perspective. So this is an example. And so for me, that's what it's about, is these multiple perspectives. So she lives in Sweden. She was raised in Ghana, born and raised in Ghana. So one of the articles that we talked about with her was titled, I didn't know I was Black until I was 9. At the age of 9 is when her family left Ghana. And I'm sorry, Sierra Leone. I'm sorry, I think it was Sierra Leone. When her family left Sierra Leone and went to Switzerland. So she went from A to Z just in a very, very short period of time. And for the very first time had people referring to her in a negative way as, oh, you're Black kind of thing. And so I'm saying all of that to say that your point is well taken, because there are so many facets. If you think of this like a diamond, you can see like all of these different facets, but it's all one diamond, right? But there's all these different facets involved. And if I'm not strong enough, courageous enough to step into my own discomfort, it becomes very easy for me to dispel what you're trying to say, even though it is your truth within the context of your experience. So who am I to sit here and tell you, no, it really wasn't that way? That just that never makes sense to me. You know? So it's really about this whole entire thing of being willing to walk into perspective taking. Meaning I'm not here just to listen for the purpose of understanding. I'm listening for the purpose of getting a better, deeper consciousness of what your experience actually is like.
Yeah. I think that's very important. If you can walk a mile in another man's shoes, they say, you can truly understand it. And a lot of times we just look at it from our point, and our point's right, no matter what.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I do a little bit like kind of this experiment or like this exercise where if you could imagine you're in a living room, somebody's living room, right? And there's two of you, say it's you and Casey in this living room. So if the two of you stand back to back and look at what is directly in front of you and write out a description of what's in front of you, your descriptions are going to be very different, because KC might be looking at the beautiful window and you can look out the window and see all the flowers and all of that, whereas you might be looking at the fireplace. So if you're writing down, what does this living room look like from my perspective, those two perspectives are very different. But then how can you come together and now argue? And, KC will say, no, there's flowers out there. No, it's a fireplace. So when you put it like in that kind of sense, it just seems ridiculous to try to argue against somebody else's perspective just because it's different from yours. But the thing with that exercise, you're both in the same room.
Yeah.
You're both in the same room. You're just seeing it through a different perspective.
That makes sense. Last time KC was over my house, we had to fight because he kept putting his feet on my couch. And I don't play that. I don't play that at all. But yeah, I mean, that makes a whole lot of sense. You can be in the same environment and still see it completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a good takeaway. So what do you feel as far as like our progress? Are we progressing? Are we regressing? Are we being lulled to sleep?
I think we are progressing,
mm-hmm.
but it's not huge monumental progressions yet.
Okay.
And I think there will be, I think this election, like between this election here
mm-hmm.
and then the next presidential election, is really going to set the tone for where we have the potential to go.
Okay.
Because I believe we have the potential to just keep moving in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, though, I think we're living in an age now where people want instant results. This is not instant result kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
My friends over at A Long Talk, they have a 15-year commitment. I think they're going into their third year now. 15-year commitment for eradicating racism. So if you think about if you compare that 15 years to the period of enslavement, like if you start with the transatlantic slave trade, and then that was, halted in the mid 1800s or so. And then from there, it just evolved.
Yeah.
Now it's the domestic slave trade. And then if you listen to Brian Stephen, now it's evolved even more. So it went from the domestic slave trade, like, okay, we've abolished slavery, air quotes, we've abolished slavery, but then we just went into black codes and we went into Jim Crow and then we went into this. And so it just keeps evolving. And then we got the 13th Amendment, the exception clause. So now we got mass incarceration. So all of these things that evolved from this original idea of having labor for free. When you think about it. And then all of the brutality and the violence and everything that's associated with that, because folks don't want to be in bondage.
Yeah.
So people are going to fight. This is like your human instinct to fight being in bondage. So here we are in 2022 and the fight continues. It's all the same fight. The folks coming from Africa on the slave ships, that's the same fight that we're engaged in 2022. It just looks different, but it's the same. It's the same fight. And so I see this as a metamorphosis. It's going to take a while for the changes to take hold.
Okay.
And I'm in it for the long haul.
Okay. Well, hey, there's always a game. There's ones that play the game and know the game, make the rules of the game. There's ones that are in the game, don't know how the game's going. And then there's those that don't even know it's a game existing.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Well, thanks so much for coming on and sharing with us your progress. And you've got big things coming up. And everyone, we definitely want you to check out the summit. We'll make it available for everybody.
Excellent.
Once it's ready.
Excellent.
And then also Inflexion Point Podcast.
And that's Inflection with an X.
With the X.
I always
that's
say
right.
that. It's Inflection with an X.
Yeah. I had to get it right because, KC was trying to call it all kind of other stuff. I was like, hey, what are you talking about? He's talking about Inception, the Inception. I'm like, what? Yes, it's Inflection Point. But, I'm glad you helped spell it because I would have spelled it wrong.
Yeah.
But yes, thanks so much for coming on and sharing and the progress. And we definitely want to keep in touch with you and get further down the road how things are progressing and how things are moving. And next time, get Gail and Mavis back on Zoom and find out how things are going.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So just many thanks to you and to KC for just kind of inviting me into your fold and all of that. So I get excited every time I come down here and have the chance to come into the studio. So it's good. It's all good. Yeah, yes. It's all good.
Well, great. Well, this has been another #1 rated business show with your host, Mr. Marketology. You see how I put that radio voice on him? And we are out, even though KC always says that. We are out. Come on, sound boy, get on it. Yeah, we started doing more